Welcome, friend, to another journey together. Tonight, we will explore the gentle secrets of Zen masters and ancient keys they forged to quiet the restless mind and find profound clarity. Feel free to share the time and place from which you are listening. I am about to share a collection of rare and gentle Zen stories, each carrying an overlooked truth about freeing the mind from its self-made prisons of anxiety, overthinking, and dissatisfaction. These are more than just simple tales for the evening. They are transmissions of insight goes from enlightened minds who discovered a fundamental secret. True rest is not a destination you arrive at, but a path you uncover within. The great Zen master Dogen taught to study the way is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to be enlightened by all things. Tonight, we will explore how these ancient stories help us gently let go of the self that worries and strives. As these timeless narratives unfold, you may feel a subtle shift within. The noise of the day will begin to fade. The weight you've been carrying will feel lighter, and you will be guided toward a natural state of deep awareness and peaceful rest. So allow yourself to settle in now. Let go of the day. Take a slow, deep breath. And as you release it, open your mind to receive the wisdom that has traveled through ages to find you here in this very moment. In a peaceful monastery nestled among rolling green hills lived a young monk named Kenji, a man of deep sincerity and an open heart. Every morning he rose before dawn to meditate. His dedication to practice was evident to all who knew him, yet something troubled his spirit deeply. Each day, when Kenji read news from the outside world or heard travelers speak of distant suffering wars raging in foreign lands, children going hungry in nearby villages, sickness spreading through communities, and cruelty seeming to flourish wherever he looked, his heart grew heavier. The weight of all this suffering pressed down on him like a mountain, making it hard to breathe, let alone find the peace his practice promised. One morning, unable to bear it any longer, Kenji approached his master, Rashi Tanaka, who was tending to the small monastery garden. The elderly teacher moved slowly among the vegetables, pulling weeds with careful attention. His weathered hands gentle with each plant. Master, Kenji began, his voice heavy with anguish. I feel the suffering of all beings pressing upon my heart. I see the wars, the hunger, the sickness, and the endless cruelty that humans inflict upon each other. This weight is crushing me. How can I possibly find peace when the world is drowning in such turmoil? How can I sit in meditation when others are in agony? Master Tanaka looked up from his radishes, his eyes kind yet piercing. Without speaking, he gestured toward a large, smooth river stone sitting at the edge of the garden path. The stone was beautiful in its simplicity, worn smooth by countless years of water and weather, yet clearly very heavy. Pick it up, the master instructed quietly. Though puzzled, Kenji obeyed. He bent down and, with considerable effort, lifted the stone. It was even heavier than it appeared, and his muscles strained under its weight. His back began to ache almost immediately. Now, said Master Tanaka, returning to his weeding, carry it with you for the rest of the day. Do not put it down. Take it to meditation, to meals, to your work, to your rest. Let it be your constant companion. Kenji did as instructed, though he wondered at the purpose. He carried the stone everywhere, throughout that long day. During morning meditation, his arms trembled with the effort of holding it. At mealtimes, he could barely eat with the stone in his lap. While sweeping the temple floors, his movements were clumsy and awkward. By afternoon, his shoulders throbbed with pain. By evening, his entire body ached. Kenji stumbled back to his master, his face pale with fatigue, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool evening air. "Master," he gasped, barely able to speak, "I cannot carry it any longer. This stone is breaking my body and my spirit. I feel as though I might collapse." Master Tanaka looked at him with infinite compassion, his eyes soft with understanding. "Then put it down," he said gently. Kenji let the stone fall to the earth with a heavy thud that seemed to echo through the quiet garden. Immediately, a wave of profound relief washed over him. His shoulders dropped, his breathing deepened, and he felt as though he might float. The absence of that crushing weight was a joy in itself. Master Tanaka set down his gardening tools and faced his student directly. "The suffering of the world is like that stone," he said softly. "It is real and heavy. Your compassion is a beautiful and necessary thing. Never lose it. But you are not meant to carry the stone of all suffering upon your shoulders. You are meant to see it, to understand its weight, to feel its reality deeply, and then to put it down so that your hands are free to help where you can." The Buddha once said, "You will not be punished for your anger. You will be punished by your anger." This ancient wisdom illuminates a profound truth about compassion and service. When we carry the weight of all suffering in our hearts, we become too burdened to be of genuine help to anyone. Why do we so readily pick up stones that are not ours to carry? Zen Buddhism points to several patterns in our conditioned minds that create this suffering. Empathic overwhelm, the tendency to absorb the pain around us until we are paralyzed by its magnitude. The ego's savior complex, a subtle form of spiritual pride that makes us believe we should be able to heal all wounds. Confusing concern with worry, the difficulty of distinguishing between healthy care for others and destructive anxiety, between compassion and co-suffering. True compassion, the kind that actually helps, requires what Zen calls emotional non-attachment. This does not mean becoming cold or uncaring. Rather, it means developing the capacity to feel deeply without being consumed, to respond skillfully without being overwhelmed. Like a doctor who can treat a patient's wounds without taking on their pain, we learn to serve from a place of clear seeing rather than emotional fusion. Think about your own life. How often do you scroll through news feeds, absorbing story after story of tragedy and injustice until you feel helpless and drained? How frequently do you take on the emotional burdens of family, friends, or even strangers, carrying their pain as if it were your own? Each time we do this, we pick up a stone. And the more stones we carry, the less capable we become of meaningful action. Zen teacher Suzuki Roshi taught, "Each of you is perfect the way you are, and you can use a little improvement." This gentle paradox applies beautifully to our relationship. With suffering, we are complete as we are, yet we can grow in wisdom about how to help skillfully. The improvement lies not in carrying more stones, but in learning when to pick them up and when to set them down. The practice of compassionate non-attachment begins with recognizing the difference between response and reaction. When we react to suffering, we often absorb it, multiplying pain without creating solutions. When we respond, we maintain enough clarity and emotional balance to take helpful action, whether that means donating to a cause we care about, volunteering our time and skills, or simply offering a kind word to someone in need. The Buddha taught, thousands of candles can be lighted from a single candle, and the life of the candle will not be shortened. Happiness never decreases by being shared. When we preserve our own inner light instead of dimming it by carrying stones, we become sources of illumination for others. Our peace becomes a gift to a troubled world. Our clarity, a beacon for those lost in confusion. Tonight, as you become aware of the various stones you may be carrying, worries about global events you cannot control, emotional burdens that belong to others, or the weight of trying to fix what is not yours to fix, can you feel the relief that comes with setting them down? Can you distinguish between caring and carrying, between compassion and co-suffering? As the Buddha taught, your work is to discover your work, and then, with all your heart, give yourself to it. When we stop carrying stones that are not ours, we free ourselves to pick up the tools that aren't, to serve the world from a place of strength rather than depletion. A young monk named Hogan had traveled far from his homeland, crossing mountains and rivers to reach a renowned monastery in China where the great master Joshu taught. Hogan had heard stories of Joshu's wisdom, how students came from across the known world to learn from him, and how even a single word from Joshu could spark enlightenment in a prepared heart. Upon arriving at the monastery, Hogan threw himself into the daily routine with tremendous enthusiasm. He rose before dawn for meditation, worked diligently in the gardens and kitchens, studied ancient texts with passionate attention, and stayed up late contemplating the Dharma talks he had heard. Day after day, week after week, he maintained this intense practice, waiting eagerly for some sign of recognition from the master. But months passed, and Master Joshu seemed not to notice him at all. During group teachings, the master's gaze would pass over Hogan as if he were invisible. When Hogan asked questions during Dharma discussions, Joshu would answer briefly and move on to other students. There were no private interviews, no special instructions, no acknowledgement of his dedication or progress. Other students, some who had arrived after Hogan, seemed to receive more attention, more guidance, and more of the master's precious time. As the seasons changed, Hogan's initial enthusiasm began to turn to frustration and self-doubt. He watched as the master spent long conversations with certain disciples, offered detailed guidance to others, and even shared meals with a select few. Meanwhile, Hogan felt increasingly invisible, as though his presence added nothing to the monastery community. His mind began to weave elaborate stories about his unworthiness. Perhaps he was not intelligent enough for Joshu's teachings. Perhaps his previous training had been inadequate. Perhaps he lacked some essential spiritual quality that the other students possessed. The more he observed and compared himself, the more inadequate he felt, unable to bear the feeling of insignificance any longer. Hogan approached Master Joshu in the garden, where the old teacher was sitting quietly among the morning flowers. The master's presence was as serene as ever, his attention focused completely on the simple act of breathing. "Master," Hogan began, his voice thick with disappointment and wounded pride, "I have been here for many months, practicing with complete dedication. I have tried to be a good student, to follow the way faithfully. Yet you have given me no personal guidance, no special attention, no recognition of my efforts. I feel like nothing more than a worthless stone lying forgotten in this monastery courtyard. Since I am clearly of no value here, I have decided to leave and seek teaching elsewhere. Master Joshu looked up slowly, his ancient eyes twinkling with something that might have been amusement. He gazed at Hogan for a long moment, then gestured around the courtyard where they sat. Smooth stones of various sizes were arranged in careful patterns, creating pathways and borders, supporting structures, and forming the foundation for garden walls. You say you are a worthless stone, Joshu replied calmly. Tell me, do you see these other stones here in the courtyard? Yes, Master, Hogan answered, wondering where this was leading. Do you sit on them when you wish to rest? The Master asked. No, Master, Hogan replied, confused. Do you move them around when they displease you? Do you kick them when you're frustrated? Do you demand that they change their shape or color to suit your preferences? No, Master, of course not, Hogan said, beginning to sense that something profound was being revealed, though he could not yet grasp what it was. Master Joshu smiled gently, his weathered face creasing with compassion. Look more carefully at these stones. This entire monastery rests upon them. They ask for nothing, no praise, no recognition, no special attention. They are not praised for their service, yet they support everything. The meditation hall stands because of them. The kitchen functions because of them. The garden paths exist because of them. Without these humble stones, this entire sacred space would crumble. He paused, allowing his words to settle into Hogan's awareness, like seeds finding fertile ground. You say you are a stone, Joshu continued. If you truly understood what it means to be a stone, to support without seeking credit, to serve without demanding recognition, to exist with such fundamental stability that others can build their practice upon your presence, you would already be enlightened. In that moment, Hogan's mind cracked open like an egg. He suddenly saw how his constant seeking for attention, his need for validation, and his desire to be special had been the very obstacles preventing him from realizing what he already was. Like the stones beneath his feet, he had been supporting the monastery community all along through his sincere practice, his quiet presence, and his simple dedication to the path. The Buddha's wisdom reminds us, 3 things cannot be long hidden: the sun, the moon, and the truth. The deeper teaching here shows us that our essential worth does not depend on external recognition or special treatment. Like the stones supporting the monastery, our true value lies not in being noticed, but in our fundamental capacity to support and sustain what matters. Why do we struggle so intensely with the need for recognition? Zen Buddhism points to several layers of conditioning that create this pattern. Ego hunger, the sense of a separate self that constantly seeks confirmation of its existence and importance through external validation. This hunger is never satisfied, for it is based on the illusion that we are separate beings competing for limited attention and approval. Cultural conditioning around achievement. From early childhood, we learn to measure our worth through grades, awards, praise, and comparative success. This conditioning runs so deep that we often transfer it to spiritual practice, unconsciously seeking enlightenment as another form of achievement rather than recognizing it as our natural state. confusing humility with spiritual materialism. The subtle ways we can turn even the most profound practices into opportunities for ego enhancement. We want to be seen as good meditators, devoted students, or awakened beings, missing the paradox that true awakening involves the dissolution of the self that seeks to be awakened. Consider your own experience. How often do you find yourself seeking recognition at work, wanting your efforts appreciated by family members, or hoping for acknowledgement of your contributions to community projects? Notice the subtle tension that arises when others receive praise you feel you deserve, or when your hard work goes unnoticed while someone else gets credit. This seeking mind creates endless suffering because it places our peace and self-worth at the mercy of others' attention and approval. Like Hogan in the story, we can spend tremendous energy trying to be noticed while missing the profound value of what we already offer simply by being present and sincere. Zen teacher Dogen wrote, "To study the Buddha way is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self." This forgetting does not mean becoming passive or ceasing to care about our actions. Rather, it means releasing our attachment to being seen as special or different, allowing us to serve from a place of natural fullness rather than ego-driven emptiness. The stone mind represents what Buddhism calls beginner's mind, the willingness to be ordinary, to serve without fanfare, to exist with such fundamental stability that others can rely on our presence. This does not mean diminishing ourselves or hiding our gifts. Rather, it means offering them freely without attachment to how they are received. In practical terms, cultivating a stone mind means practicing what Zen calls just sitting in daily life. When we work, we simply work fully without seeking applause. When we listen to friends, we listen completely without needing to be seen as good listeners. When we meditate, we just meditate without grasping for special experiences or insights. Tonight, as you consider the various ways you might be seeking recognition or feeling overlooked, can you sense the relief that comes with releasing the need to be special? Can you feel the natural dignity that emerges when you stop performing for approval and instead offer your gifts freely like stones supporting a temple? As the Buddha taught, better than 1,000 hollow words is one word that brings peace. The most profound teachings often come not from those who seek the spotlight, but from those who, like stones, support the whole with quiet strength and unshakable presence. In the ancient capital of Kyoto, where cherry blossoms lined the rivers and traditional temples stood alongside busy market streets, there lived a man who held one of the highest positions in the land, Governor Nakamura. He was responsible for the welfare of thousands of citizens, the implementation of imperial policies, and the maintenance of peace throughout his vast province. His days were filled with formal ceremonies, important decisions, and meetings with other officials who addressed him with elaborate titles and deep bows. The weight of his position was both a privilege and a burden. Every morning, servants dressed him in the finest silk robes befitting his rank. Every interaction was filtered through layers of protocol and political consideration. Every word he spoke was carefully measured for its potential impact on his reputation and effectiveness. He was Your Excellency, Honorable Governor. Lord Nakamura, titles that both elevated and isolated him from simple human connection. Despite his worldly success, Governor Nakamura felt a growing emptiness within his heart. The formal interactions, the constant performance of authority, and the distance his position created between himself and others left him longing for something more authentic. He had heard stories of a Zen master named Kawi, whose wisdom was said to cut through all pretense and speak directly to the human soul. After months of contemplation, the governor decided to seek out this teacher. On a quiet morning, Governor Nakamura made his way to Master Kayu's simple hermitage on the outskirts of the city. He brought with him his usual retinue of attendants and guards, as protocol demanded. His elaborate silk robes rustled as he walked, and his official seal gleamed in the morning sunlight, following proper etiquette. The governor's chief attendant approached the hermitage first to announce his master's arrival. The attendant knocked respectfully on the simple wooden door, and when Master Kayu appeared, he bowed deeply. "Honored master," the attendant declared with formal precision. "My lord, the most excellent governor of this province, administrator of imperial justice, protector of the people, has come to seek your wisdom. He humbly requests an audience with you." Master Kayu, a small, elderly man dressed in simple brown robes, listened to this elaborate introduction without any change in expression. When the attendant finished speaking, the master looked up calmly and replied without hesitation, "I have no business with such a person. These titles mean nothing to me. Tell him to leave." The attendant's face flushed with confusion and embarrassment. Never in his years of service had anyone refused to meet with the governor. He returned to where Governor Nakamura waited, his head bowed in shame as he reported the master's words. But rather than feeling insulted or angry, something shifted within the governor's consciousness. In that moment of rejection, he recognized something profound. The master had not rejected him personally, had rejected the elaborate facade of titles and positions that separated human beings from authentic connection. Governor Nakamura understood immediately what was required. He turned to his attendants and guards, dismissing them with gentle words. He removed his ornate outer robes, leaving only simple undergarments. He washed the formal cosmetics from his face and tied back his hair in a simple style. Then, alone and unadorned, he approached the hermitage again. This time, he knocked on the door himself. When Master Kayu appeared, the man formerly known as Your Excellency bowed humbly and spoke in a quiet, personal voice that had not been heard by others in years. "Master," he said simply, "I am Dado. I have come seeking guidance on the path to understanding. Would you be willing to speak with me?" Upon hearing this humble introduction, using his given name rather than his governmental title, Master Kayu's stern expression immediately transformed into a warm, welcoming smile. His eyes crinkled with genuine delight, and he opened his arms in a gesture of embrace. "Ah, Dado," he exclaimed with evident joy, "please come in immediately. I have been hoping to meet you. Let us sit together and share tea while we speak of the Dharma." The transformation in the master's reception was complete and immediate. Where moments before there had been cold rejection of pompous formality, now there was warm welcome for authentic humanity. As the Buddha observed, "However many holy words you read, however many you speak, what good will they do you if you do not act upon them?" What emerges from this story is a profound teaching about the difference between our essential nature and the roles we play in the world. Why do we become so identified with our social roles and titles, that we lose touch with our authentic selves. Zen Buddhism reveals several layers of conditioning that create this pattern. Role identification, the gradual process by which we begin to believe that we are the positions we hold, rather than human beings temporarily filling those positions. Over time, we can become so merged with our professional identities, family roles, or social status that we forget the simple person beneath all the layers. Society's emphasis on hierarchical recognition. We learn early that certain titles, achievements, and positions command respect and attention. This conditioning can become so strong that we unconsciously believe our worth as human beings is tied to these external markers of success. We begin to introduce ourselves through our accomplishments rather than our essence. Face-saving Mianzi, our attachment to maintaining a particular image or reputation. The more invested we become in how others perceive our roles, the more rigid and defensive we become about maintaining those personas. We build elaborate walls of formality and protocol that, while perhaps necessary for certain functions, can isolate us from genuine human connection. Consider your own life. Notice how differently you feel and behave when you're at work versus at home versus with close friends. While some adaptation to context is natural and appropriate, where might you be hiding behind professional titles, social roles, or family positions in ways that prevent others from knowing who you really are? This pattern shows up in subtle ways throughout our daily interactions. We might introduce ourselves as Dr. Smith rather than Mary, emphasizing credentials over personhood. We might interact with service workers differently when we're dressed professionally versus casually. We might find ourselves speaking differently when we're in positions of authority versus when we're asking for help. The teaching here isn't that social roles are inherently problematic. Governments need governors, hospitals need doctors, families need parents. Rather, it's about maintaining awareness of the difference between the temporary roles we play and our enduring humanity. Master Caillou wasn't rejecting governance or suggesting that social organization is worthless. He was pointing to the spiritual danger of becoming so identified with external roles that we lose access to our authentic selves. Zen teacher Alan Watts wrote, "We are living in a culture entirely hypnotized by the illusion of time." We might add that we're also hypnotized by the illusion of fixed identity. We believe we are our job titles, our relationship roles, our social positions, when in reality, these are simply temporary costumes we wear while playing our parts in the human drama. The practice of what we might call essential meeting involves learning to recognize and connect with the fundamental personhood in ourselves and others, regardless of the roles and titles present in the interaction. This doesn't mean ignoring appropriate social protocols or abandoning professional boundaries. Rather, it means maintaining awareness of the human being who exists both within and beyond these structures. When Governor Nakamura became simply he didn't lose his governmental responsibilities or his capacity to serve his province effectively. Instead, he gained access to wisdom and connection that could actually enhance his service by grounding it in genuine humanity rather than mere authority. Tonight, as you reflect on the various roles and identities you carry throughout your day, can you sense the simple person who exists beneath all the titles and positions? Can you imagine what it might feel like to meet others and be met from this place of essential humanity, rather than through the filters of social hierarchy? As the Buddha taught, in the end, only three things matter: how much you loved, how gently you lived, and how gracefully you let go of things not meant for you. The titles and positions we hold are among the things we must ultimately let go of. But the love and gentleness we bring to our roles, these arise from our authentic nature and remain with us always. Sister Kiyono had practiced Zen meditation for many years at a mountain monastery where the air was thin and pure, and the silence was broken only by the sound of wind through pine trees. She was known among her fellow practitioners for her sincere dedication, her disciplined daily routine, and her genuine desire to awaken to truth. Each morning before dawn, she sat in meditation. Each day, she worked mindfully in the monastery gardens or kitchen. Each evening, she studied ancient texts and contemplated the Dharma talks of her teacher. Yet, despite years of earnest practice, despite countless hours of sitting meditation, despite her careful attention to every aspect of monastic life, enlightenment seemed to elude her. She had studied all the classic koans, memorized essential sutras, and could discuss Buddhist philosophy with considerable sophistication. But the direct, unmistakable realization that her teachers spoke of the sudden recognition of her true nature remained beyond her grasp. Other students in the monastery had experienced breakthrough moments. She had witnessed the joy and transformation that came over their faces when understanding dawned. She had heard their expressions of gratitude to the teacher and their descriptions of seeing reality with completely fresh eyes. Yet for Kiyono, practice remained effortful, understanding remained intellectual, and the promised liberation remained a concept rather than a living reality. As seasons passed and years accumulated, a subtle desperation crept into Kiyono's practice. She increased her meditation time, hoping that more hours of sitting would force the breakthrough she sought. She analyzed her approach, wondering if she was doing something wrong, missing some crucial instruction, or lacking some essential capacity for awakening. The harder she tried to grasp enlightenment, the more distant it seemed to become. One evening in late autumn, after a particularly long day of intensive meditation retreat, Kiyono felt exhausted in both body and spirit. The monastery had provided water for evening tea, and she had filled an old bamboo bucket from the well. The bucket was beautiful in its simplicity, woven from strips of bamboo carefully bound together with natural fibers. It had served the monastery community for many years, carrying countless gallons of water from the well to the kitchen as Kiyono carried the full bucket back toward the monastery buildings. She noticed how perfectly the full moon was reflected in the still water's surface. The reflection was so clear and complete that she paused for a moment to admire its beauty. The silvery light seemed to dance gently as she walked, creating a moving meditation on the relationship between reality and reflection, between the actual moon above and its image below. But the old bucket had reached the end of its useful life. The bamboo strips had dried and loosened over years of use, and the binding fibers had gradually weakened. As Kiyono walked slowly back through the moonlit courtyard, absorbed in watching the moon's reflection shimmer in the water, the inevitable happened. Suddenly, without warning, the bottom of the bucket gave way completely. The bamboo strips separated, the binding snapped, and the bucket simply fell apart in her hands. In an instant, the water rushed out onto the stone path, splashing her robes and disappearing into the spaces between the courtyard stones. With the water gone, the moon's reflection vanished as completely as if it had never existed. In that moment of unexpected loss, watching the water disappear, seeing the moon's reflection vanish, feeling the solid bucket dissolve into separate pieces in her hands, something profound shifted in Kiono's consciousness. The very thing she had been grasping for so desperately, the enlightenment she had been trying to achieve through years of effortful practice, suddenly revealed itself in the complete letting go. She understood, in a flash of recognition more certain than anything she had ever known intellectually. The enlightenment she had been seeking was like the moon's reflection in water, beautiful, compelling, but ultimately a reflection of something that was already present. When she stopped trying to hold on to the reflection, when the container of her grasping mind fell apart like the old bucket, what remained was not the image of awakeness, but awake awareness itself, standing in the moonlit courtyard with broken bamboo strips in her hands and water soaking into the earth at her feet. Kiono began to laugh. The sound echoed off the monastery walls, a sound of profound relief and joy. That night, she composed a poem to capture her realization. With this and that, I tried to keep the pail together, and then the bottom fell out. Where there is no water, there is no moon in the water. Ancient Buddhist wisdom tells us, you are perfect as you are, and you could use a little improvement. This tale unveils the paradox at the heart of all spiritual seeking. The more desperately we grasp for awakening, the more we reinforce the very sense of separation that awakening dissolves. Why do we struggle so intensely with letting go, even when holding on causes suffering? Zen Buddhism points to several deep patterns in our conditioned consciousness. Attainment mind, the belief that peace, happiness, or fulfillment exists somewhere other than where we are right now. This creates endless seeking, constantly reaching toward a future state, while missing the completeness of present experience. Attachment to method. We often become so focused on our spiritual practices, meditation techniques, or philosophical understanding that we mistake the finger pointing at the moon for the moon itself. The practices become another form of grasping rather than opportunities for letting go. Buddha sickness, becoming attached to the very idea of enlightenment, making it into another object to be obtained rather than recognizing it as the very awareness that is already seeking. We create elaborate mental constructions about what awakening should look like, how it should feel, and what abilities it might bring, then spend years trying to achieve our own concepts. Consider your own experience with seeking, whether for spiritual understanding, professional success, relationship satisfaction, or personal happiness. Notice how the intensity of wanting often seems to push away what we're reaching for. The job interview goes better when we're not desperate for the position. Relationships flow more naturally when we're not clinging to particular outcomes. Even simple activities, like trying to remember a forgotten name, work better when we stop efforting and let the answer arise naturally. This principle applies profoundly to spiritual practice. The awakening that traditions like Zen point toward is not a state to be achieved, but the very awareness in which all states arise and pass away. It's not something we can grasp because it's what we already are. It's not somewhere we can go because it's where we already are. The moon's reflection in Kyono's bucket represents all the spiritual experiences, insights, and states of consciousness we might collect during practice. These can be beautiful and meaningful, but they are reflections of reality rather than reality itself. When we mistake them for the goal, we become like someone trying to catch the moon by grasping its reflection in water. Zen teacher Shunryu Suzuki said, "In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities, but in the expert's mind, there are few." Kyono's breakthrough came not through accumulating more spiritual knowledge or developing more sophisticated techniques, but through the complete collapse of her efforts to keep the pail together. When her expert mind, with all its strategies, expectations, and spiritual ambitions, fell apart like the old bucket, what remained was the simple awareness that had been present all along. The practice suggested by the story is not to stop meditating or abandon sincere spiritual effort, but to hold all practice lightly. We can sit in meditation without grasping for special experiences. We can study wisdom teachings without trying to collect insights like trophies. We can engage in spiritual community without comparing our progress to others. Most importantly, we can begin to notice when we're trying to keep the pail together, when we're efforting to maintain particular states of mind, forcing spiritual experiences, or grasping for future attainment. In those moments, we can practice what Zen calls just sitting, simply being present without agenda, allowing whatever arises to arise and pass away naturally. Tonight, as you consider what you might be trying to grasp or achieve in your own life, can you sense the relief that might come with letting the bottom fall out? What would remain if you stopped trying to hold together your concepts about who you should be, what you should accomplish, or what your life should look like? As the Buddha taught, letting go gives us freedom, and freedom is the only condition for happiness. True freedom comes not from getting what we want, but from releasing our attachment to wanting itself. When the water spills and the reflection disappears, what remains is the moon itself. Master Banki was renowned throughout Japan for his direct and uncompromising approach to Zen teaching. Unlike many teachers who relied on elaborate rituals, complex philosophical discussions, or dramatic demonstrations of spiritual power, Banki had a gift for pointing people toward the simple truth already present in their immediate experience. His monastery attracted students from many different Buddhist schools, as well as curious visitors who had heard stories of his unconventional wisdom. One day, a practitioner from another Buddhist lineage came to visit Banki's monastery. This visitor had spent years following a teacher famous for his supernatural abilities and miraculous powers. He had witnessed his master perform seemingly impossible feats, healing the sick with a touch, manifesting objects from empty air, and demonstrating psychic abilities that defied ordinary understanding. These experiences had filled the visitor with tremendous reverence for the spiritual path and confidence in his teacher's realization. During the evening Dharma talk, as Master Banki sat quietly before the assembled community, the visitor could not contain his excitement about sharing the miraculous abilities of his own teacher. When the formal talk concluded and time was given for questions, the visitor stood up eagerly. "Master Banki," he began, his voice filled with admiration and perhaps a hint of challenge, "I must tell you about my teacher's extraordinary powers. Our founder was a truly great man, a living saint who could perform the most amazing miracles. Just last month, I witnessed him write a holy name through the air across a wide river, and the sacred characters appeared blazing in the sky for all to see. The entire village was filled with wonder and devotion. Can you perform such miraculous feats? Do you have powers like this to demonstrate the depth of your realization? The visitor sat down, clearly expecting to be impressed by Banki's response, perhaps hoping to witness some supernatural demonstration, or at least hear descriptions of equally marvelous abilities. The other students in the hall turned their attention to their teacher, curious how he would respond to this implicit challenge. Master Banki remained completely still for several moments, his expression neither defensive nor dismissive, but simply present and attentive. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet and matter-of-fact, without any trace of competition or superiority. Perhaps your teacher can indeed perform that kind of miracle, Banki said calmly. I do not doubt what you have witnessed, and I have no criticism of such demonstrations. But I must tell you honestly, that is not my way. Such powers do not interest me, and I do not cultivate them. The visitor looked somewhat disappointed and pressed further. But Master, if you cannot perform such wonders, what then distinguishes your teaching? What is your miracle? How do we know that you have achieved genuine realization? Master Banki's eyes twinkled with the kind of gentle humor that often accompanies profound truth. He looked directly at his questioner with complete sincerity and replied, My miracle is this: when I feel hungry, I eat. When I feel thirsty, I drink. When I am tired, I sleep. When spring comes, I notice the flowers blooming. When winter arrives, I observe the snow falling. This is my miracle, to be completely present for the simple reality of each moment. The hall fell into deep silence as the implications of this teaching settled into the awareness of everyone present. The visitor, who had come expecting supernatural demonstrations, found himself confronted with something far more challenging, an invitation to recognize the miraculous nature of his own immediate experience. The Buddha taught, there are only two mistakes one can make along the road to truth: not going all the way and not starting. The heart of this lesson lies in recognizing that the miracle we seek is not hidden in extraordinary demonstrations, but reveals itself in the complete embrace of ordinary experience. Why do we overlook the miraculous nature of our everyday existence? Zen Buddhism reveals several layers of conditioning that blind us to what is always already present. Spiritual materialism, the unconscious belief that enlightenment must be dramatic, supernatural, or visibly impressive. We imagine that awakened consciousness should produce extraordinary powers, mystical visions, or at least some obvious signs that distinguish the enlightened from the ordinary, habituation to the familiar. The mind tends to dismiss as mundane precisely those experiences that are most constantly available: breathing, seeing, tasting, feeling, the simple fact of awareness itself. We become so accustomed to these fundamental miracles that we stop recognizing them as miracles at all. It's as if we're fish who have forgotten the water we swim in. Cultural conditioning toward complexity. We live in a society that values the rare, the difficult, and the spectacular. This conditioning seeps into our spiritual seeking, making us believe that profound truth must be complicated, esoteric, or accessible only through years of specialized training. The possibility that ultimate reality might be as simple as feeling hungry and eating challenges our entire framework of how spiritual accomplishment should look. Consider your own experience right now. As you engage with these words, notice the miracle of vision, how marks on a page or patterns of light on a screen somehow transform into meaning in your consciousness. Observe the mystery of understanding, how abstract concepts arise in awareness without any effort on your part. Feel the rhythm of breathing that continues without your direction, the beating of your heart that sustains life, moment by moment. These experiences are so ordinary that we typically ignore them completely. Yet each one represents a profound mystery that no science can fully explain. How does consciousness arise from matter? How does awareness recognize itself? How does meaning emerge from pattern? These are questions that point to the miraculous nature of the most basic aspects of existence. Master Bankie's miracle of eating when hungry and drinking when thirsty points to what Zen calls natural functioning, the spontaneous responsiveness of awakened consciousness to the needs of each moment. This doesn't mean being reactive or impulsive, but rather developing such intimate attunement to present reality that appropriate action arises naturally without the interference of excessive thinking, second-guessing, or spiritual ambition. Zen teacher Dogen wrote, "To study the Buddha way is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to be actualized by myriad things." When we stop trying to be spiritual in some special way, when we abandon the search for extraordinary experiences, we become available to be completely present for the myriad small miracles that make up each day. This teaching doesn't diminish the value of dedicated practice, intensive meditation, or sincere study of wisdom traditions. Rather, it points to the ultimate goal of all such practices, not to achieve supernatural powers or accumulate spiritual experiences, but to become so naturally responsive to reality that our actions flow effortlessly from clear seeing rather than from ego-driven seeking. The miracle of eating when hungry extends to every aspect of daily life. It means speaking when speech is called for and remaining silent when words would be unnecessary. It means working with full attention when work is required and resting completely when rest is needed. It means feeling emotions fully as they arise, without either suppressing them or being overwhelmed by them. In practical terms, cultivating appreciation for ordinary miracles begins with what Zen calls beginner's mind, approaching familiar experiences with fresh attention as if encountering them for the first time. Try eating a meal with complete presence, noticing not just the flavors, but the incredible coordination of sensory experience, memory, and pleasure that makes eating possible. Pay attention to a conversation with a friend, marveling at the mysterious process by which thoughts in one mind somehow communicate themselves to another. Notice the miracle of sleep, how consciousness dissolves each night and reconstitutes itself each morning. Observe the daily resurrection of awareness from the small death of unconsciousness. Watch how dreams arise from nowhere and return to nowhere, creating entire worlds that seem completely real while we're experiencing them tonight. As you prepare for rest, can you recognize the miracle in this simple transition from waking to sleeping? Can you feel the extraordinary in the ordinary rhythm of your breath, the weight of your body settling into stillness, the the natural release of the day's activities and concerns. As the Buddha taught, if you truly loved yourself, you would never harm yourself with negative thoughts. The deepest expression of self-love might be the simple appreciation for the miracle of your own existence, not the idealized version of yourself you might become, but the breathing, feeling aware being you already are. True miracles are not violations of natural law, but recognitions of the natural law of consciousness itself. The mysterious fact that the universe has somehow awakened to itself through your eyes, experiences itself through your senses, and knows itself through your awareness. When you eat because you're hungry, you participate in the cosmic miracle of life sustaining itself. This is the miracle land. It is yours as well. In the vast depths of the Pacific Ocean, where sunlight filtered down through layers of blue and green and coral gardens swayed in gentle currents, a young fish swam restlessly through familiar waters. Despite being surrounded by the wonder of ocean life schools of silver fish moving like liquid metal, sea anemones dancing in the current, and the rhythmic pulse of waves far above, the young fish felt troubled by a persistent question. One day, approaching an ancient sea turtle whose shell bore the scars and wisdom of countless journeys, the young fish asked earnestly, "Elder, I keep hearing other sea creatures talk about something they call the ocean. They speak of it with such reverence, as if it's the most important thing in existence. But I've searched everywhere, and I cannot find this ocean anywhere. What exactly is this mysterious thing everyone talks about?" The old turtles, eyes deep and patient like tidal pools, regarded the young fish with gentle amusement. "Little one," the turtle replied in a voice worn smooth by decades of storms and calms, "the ocean is this very thing that surrounds you on all sides." At every moment, the young fish looked around frantically, darting left and right, swimming up toward the distant surface and down toward the sandy bottom. "But I don't see anything surrounding me. There's nothing here but water and fish and plants and rocks. Where is this ocean you speak of? Why can't I see it?" The turtles settled more comfortably on a bed of soft kelp, understanding that this was a teaching moment that required patience. "Of course you cannot see it, young friend," the turtle explained. "The ocean is both inside and outside of you. You were born in the ocean. You breathe the ocean. You are nourished by the ocean. And one day you will return to the ocean. The ocean flows through your gills and around your body just as naturally as your own scales cover your skin. It is so much a part of you that it has become invisible." The young fish paused, beginning to sense something vast and fundamental that had been present all along but remained unnamed. "You mean this water I swim through is the ocean?" "Yes," the turtle confirmed. "You have never been separate from it, not for a single moment of your existence. As the Buddha observed, all conditioned things are impermanent. Strive on with awareness." This ancient wisdom illuminates our relationship with the Tao. The fundamental flow of existence permeates everything, yet remains largely unnoticed. In our daily lives, what emerges from this story is a profound teaching about the nature of spiritual blindness. Like the fish who cannot see the ocean, we live immersed in the sacred, but fail to recognize it because it is too close, too constant, too fundamental to our existence to register as separate from ourselves. Why do we struggle to perceive the universal flow that sustains and surrounds us. Zen Buddhism points to our habit of seeking the extraordinary while overlooking the ordinary. We imagine that spiritual truth must be dramatic, mystical, or separate from everyday experience. We look for God in burning bushes while missing the divine presence in morning coffee, in the breath entering our lungs, in the simple fact of awareness itself. The Tao expresses itself in everything we encounter: the changing seasons, the cycles of sleep and waking, the rhythm of our heartbeat, the way thoughts arise and dissolve in consciousness. It is the organizing principle behind both the spiral of galaxies and the unfurling of fern leaves, the same pattern expressing itself at every scale of existence. Consider how often throughout your day you might glimpse this underlying flow without recognizing it. The way traffic naturally organizes itself, despite having no central controller. The way conversations find their own rhythm and timing. The way your body breathes without conscious direction. The way solutions to problems seem to emerge from somewhere beyond deliberate thinking. These are all expressions of the Tao working through apparent chaos to create spontaneous order. Zen teacher Alan Watts taught, "Trying to define yourself is like trying to bite your own teeth." The Tao is similar. It cannot be grasped or contained because we are expressions of it rather than separate observers of it. Every attempt to understand the Tao through conceptual thinking is like the fish trying to get outside the ocean to examine it objectively. This doesn't mean the Tao is merely a philosophical concept. It is the most practical and immediate reality. The intelligence that coordinates the trillions of cells in your body. The awareness in which all thoughts and sensations. The life force that animates everything from redwood trees to bacteria in Chinese philosophy. The character for Tao literally means the way or the path. But this is not a path we walk toward some distant destination. It is the path that walks itself through us. The way reality unfolds moment by moment without requiring our management or control. Laozi wrote, "The Tao that can be spoken is not the eternal Tao." Yet here we are, using words to point toward something beyond words. This is the beautiful paradox of spiritual teaching. We must use the limited to point toward the unlimited, knowing that the finger pointing at the moon is never the moon itself. Tonight, as you feel the breath moving in and out of your body without your conscious control, can you sense the Tao expressing itself through this simple miracle? Can you recognize in this automatic process the same intelligence that moves the planets and changes the seasons? The Buddha taught, "Look within. Thou art the Buddha." You are not separate from the ocean of existence any more than a wave is separate from the sea. In recognizing this fundamental non-separation, we stop seeking the Tao and begin living as its conscious expression. High in the mountain villages, there lived a simple stonecutter who had discovered the secret of happiness without knowing it. Each dawn, he would climb winding paths to the quarries, his tools balanced across his shoulders. As he worked among the stones, he would sing old mountain songs that echoed across the valleys. Though he was poor by society's measures, living in a modest hut with few possessions, the stonecutter desired nothing more than what he had. His simple life felt complete. The rhythm of his work, the beauty of the mountains, the satisfaction of honest labor. His heart held not a care in the world. One day he was called to work on the grand mansion of a wealthy nobleman. As he approached the estate, his eyes widened at the magnificence before him. Marble columns reached toward the sky. Gardens sprawled in perfect symmetry. For the first time in his life, the stonecutter felt the sharp pang of desire pierce his contentment. If only I were rich, he sighed. Then I would not have to earn my living in sweat and toil as I do now. To his amazement, a voice whispered from the stones, "Your wish has been granted. Henceforth, anything you desire will be given to you." He returned home that evening to find his humble hut replaced by a mansion as magnificent as the nobleman's. Overwhelmed with joy, he abandoned his tools and began enjoying the luxurious life of the wealthy. But one hot afternoon, gazing from his ornate window, he saw the king's royal procession passing by. The monarch sat in cool shade, surrounded by noblemen and servants, appearing serene and powerful above the common heat. "How I wish I were a king myself," he thought, and immediately found himself reclining in silk cushions within the royal carriage. But the carriage proved warmer than expected. Even through thick walls, the sun's heat penetrated relentlessly. "I wish I were the sun," he declared, and found himself sending waves of light and heat across the universe. As the sun, he felt magnificent and all-powerful until thick storm clouds gathered, completely blocking his rays. "I wish to be a cloud," he said, and so he became a massive storm cloud, glorying in his power to block the sun. But as he transformed into falling rain, he encountered an enormous rock that blocked his path completely. "A mere rock more powerful than I," he exclaimed. "I wish to be a rock." Suddenly, he stood tall upon the mountainside, feeling he had achieved true permanence. But soon he heard chipping sounds at his base. Looking down, he saw a tiny human figure cutting chunks of stone away. "A puny creature more powerful than I," he cried. "I want to be a man again." And so he found himself once more a stone cutter, climbing familiar mountain paths. But now something had changed. As he shaped stones and felt mountain breezes, his heart swelled with deep contentment. His song returned richer than before, because he had learned to be content with exactly who he was. The Buddha once said, "Health is the greatest gift, contentment the greatest wealth." This ancient wisdom illuminates the endless cycle of wanting that keeps us from recognizing the abundance already present in our lives. Why do we chase after different conditions, always believing happiness lies in the next transformation? Each desire fulfilled only reveals the next desire, creating an endless cycle of dissatisfaction. The stonecutter's journey reveals the futility of seeking happiness through external circumstances. Consider your own versions of this cycle. "I'll be happy when I get promoted," only to discover new stresses. "I'll be content with more money," only to find greater wealth brings new worries. Each achievement reveals the next mountain to climb. Zen teacher Suzuki Roshi said, "Each of you is perfect the way you are, and you can use a little improvement." This paradox points to the heart of contentment, the ability to fully accept what is while still engaging wholeheartedly with life's natural changes. The stonecutter's final transformation wasn't into something greater, but into appreciation for what he had always been. His work remained the same, but his relationship to life was completely transformed. Contentment isn't found in having different experiences, but in bringing different awareness to whatever experiences arise tonight. As you notice the mind's habitual reaching toward what's not here, can you experiment with the stonecutter's final wisdom? Can you find the song that emerges when you stop trying to be anything other than what you are? As the Buddha taught, contentment is natural wealth. Luxury is artificial poverty. The greatest transformation available isn't becoming something different, but recognizing the inherent completeness of what we already are. After a decade of intensive training under various masters, studying countless texts, and dedicating himself wholly to Zen practice, a monk named Tenno finally achieved what he had long sought: recognition as a qualified teacher. His understanding of Buddhist philosophy was profound, his meditation practice deep and stable, and his ability to guide others had been tested and approved. He received formal acknowledgement that he was ready to teach the Dharma and help others along the path of awakening. Proud of his accomplishment and eager to learn from one of the most renowned masters of his time, Tenno decided to visit the famous Zen master Nanin. The older teacher's reputation for wisdom and insight was legendary throughout the region, and Tenno looked forward to engaging in deep Dharma discussions and perhaps receiving some final polishing of his understanding. It was a rainy day when Tenno made his pilgrimage to Nanin's temple. The roads were muddy and slippery, puddles reflected the gray sky, and the steady rainfall required him to carry an umbrella to stay dry. When he reached the temple, he carefully removed his wooden clogs and placed them on the covered porch along with his umbrella, just as custom dictated. He arranged his outer robes, composed himself properly, and entered the temple to meet the great master. Nanin received him graciously, bowing with the respect due to a fellow teacher while maintaining the dignity of his greater experience. They sat together in the simple receiving room, and Tenno expected their conversation to focus on sophisticated points of doctrine, subtle aspects of meditation technique, or perhaps the challenges of guiding students. Instead, after the initial pleasantries, Nanin asked what seemed like an absurdly mundane question. "I noticed you left your wooden clogs and umbrella on the porch when you entered. Tell me, did you place your umbrella to the left of your shoes or to the right?" Tenno was caught completely off guard. Of all the profound topics they could discuss, why was this renowned master asking about such a trivial detail? He tried to recall the moment he had arranged his belongings, but realized with growing dismay that he had no idea. He had been so focused on the importance of this meeting, so preoccupied with the impressive conversation he expected to have, that he had performed the simple act of arranging his belongings in complete unconsciousness. I don't know," Tenno admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. In that moment of confession, the full implications of his ignorance became clear to him. Here he was, a certified teacher of mindfulness and awareness, and he couldn't even remember a simple action he had performed just minutes earlier. Nanin smiled with infinite compassion, not mockery. "Then you have not yet attained full awareness," he said gently. "Someone who is truly awake pays complete attention to every moment, every action, every detail of experience. The way you arrange your belongings reflects the same quality of attention you bring to meditation, to teaching, to all of life." In that instant, Tenno's pride in his accomplishments crumbled, replaced by a humbling recognition of how much deeper his practice needed to go. He understood that true awareness isn't something you achieve once and then possess forever. It's a quality of attention that must be cultivated and maintained in every single moment, in the most ordinary activities, as well as the most exalted spiritual practices. Without hesitation, Tenno requested to become Nanin's student. For the next 10 years, he studied under the master's guidance, learning to bring the same quality of conscious attention to placing his shoes that he brought to formal meditation, to treat the arrangement of an umbrella with the same reverence he showed to sacred texts when he finally left Nanin's temple. He was a completely different kind of teacher, one who understood that enlightenment is not a destination, but a way of traveling, not an achievement, but a continuous practice of complete presence, as the Buddha observed. If you want to know your past, look at your present condition. If you want to know your future, look at your present actions. What emerges from this story is the recognition that true spiritual development is measured not by our peak experiences, but by the quality of attention we bring to ordinary moments. Why do we assume that enlightenment exists only in special circumstances, formal practices, or elevated states of consciousness? Zen Buddhism teaches that awakening is found precisely in our ability to be fully present for whatever is actually happening, whether it's sitting in meditation or simply placing an umbrella beside our shoes. Tenno, single quotes as mistake was common among spiritual practitioners. He had developed the ability to be mindful during designated practice periods, but hadn't yet learned to extend that same quality of awareness to everyday activities. He could be present while sitting in meditation, but unconscious while performing simple tasks. This split between spiritual activities and ordinary activities is one of the most subtle traps on the path of awakening. We imagine that consciousness is something we turn on during meditation and turn off during mundane tasks. But true practice integrates awareness into every aspect of life. Consider your own daily routine. How present are you while brushing your teeth, making coffee, or putting on your shoes? Do you perform these activities with the same quality of attention you might bring to more important tasks? The gap between formal practice and informal practice often reveals where our awareness needs to deepen. Zen Master Dogen taught, practice and enlightenment are one. This means that the quality of consciousness we cultivate in any moment is both the path and the destination. There's no separation between developing awareness and being aware. Every moment offers a complete opportunity for awakening. Nan's question wasn't about umbrellas and shoes. It was about whether Tenno's spiritual development had penetrated into the cellular level of his daily existence. Could he maintain the same presence while performing unconscious habits that he brought to conscious spiritual practice? The Buddha said, mindfulness is the path to the deathless. Heedlessness is the path to death. Those who are mindful do not die. Those who are heedless are as if dead already. True aliveness is found in complete presence, and complete presence can be cultivated in any activity, no matter how simple or mundane. Look deeply at your own relationship between formal practice and daily life. Where do you treat certain activities as worthy of attention, while others are performed on autopilot? This isn't about becoming obsessively focused on every tiny detail, but about recognizing that the same capacity for presence that serves us in meditation can transform every aspect of our lives. The paradox is that the most ordinary moments often offer the greatest opportunities for awakening. When we're sitting in formal meditation, we expect to be mindful. But when we're simply arranging our belongings or performing routine tasks, we have a chance to discover whether our practice has truly taken root or remains confined to special circumstances. In Zen temples, students are taught that washing dishes is as sacred as chanting sutras, that sweeping floors is as important as studying philosophy. This isn't because these activities are inherently special, but because the quality of consciousness we bring to any activity determines its spiritual value. Thich Nhat Hanh wrote, "Washing dishes is not only a way to have clean dishes. Washing dishes is also a way to live fully in each moment." This points to the fundamental teaching that Nanan was offering Tenno. Every action is an opportunity to practice complete presence. The master's question revealed that Tenno's decade of training had developed his capacity for awareness during designated practice periods, but hadn't yet integrated that awareness into the seamless flow of daily life. He could be conscious when he intended to be conscious, but he hadn't yet learned to make consciousness his default state. This integration is what distinguishes genuine spiritual maturity from mere spiritual knowledge. It's relatively easy to be mindful when we remember to be mindful. The deeper practice is developing the kind of natural awareness that operates whether we're thinking about it or not. Tonight, as you perform the simple actions that end your day, brushing your teeth, changing clothes, arranging items for tomorrow, can you bring the same quality of attention you might give to formal meditation? Can you discover whether your spiritual practice has penetrated into the unconscious habits that make up so much of daily life? Buddha's wisdom reminds us, every moment is a teacher, and every place is a classroom. The umbrella beside the shoes was Tenno's teacher that day, revealing exactly where his practice needed to deepen. Sometimes the most profound lessons come disguised as the most ordinary questions, asked by masters wise enough to see that true awakening is found not in transcending the mundane, but in discovering the sacred hidden within it. In feudal Japan, a battle-hardened warrior named Nugi sought out the renowned Zen master Hakuin. The samurai's armor bore the scars of countless conflicts, and his eyes carried the weight of a man who had seen too much violence. He approached the master's simple dwelling with a question that had been burning in his mind since his last campaign. "Master Hakuin," Nugi said, bowing stiffly in his heavy armor, "I have spent my life fighting for my lord, facing death countless times. Tell me truthfully, is there really a paradise and a hell awaiting us after death?" Hakuin looked up from his tea, studying the warrior with penetrating eyes. "Who are you to ask such a question?" he inquired calmly. "I am a samurai," Nugi replied with pride, straightening his shoulders. "I serve my lord with honor and have never retreated from battle." Hakuin's expression suddenly shifted to one of disdain. "You a soldier?" he exclaimed with a dismissive laugh. "What kind of ruler would have you as his guard? Look at yourself, your face looks like that of a common beggar, weathered and crude. How could someone so lowly claim to be a protector of nobility?" The words struck Nugi like physical blows. His face flushed red with anger, and his hand instinctively moved to the hilt of his sword. The insult to his honor was unbearable. "So you have a sword," Hakuin continued, his voice dripping with mockery. "Your weapon is probably much too dull to cut off my head. I doubt you could slice through a rice paper screen, let alone defend anyone of importance." Unable to contain his rage any longer, Nugi began to draw his sword, the steel singing as it emerged from its scabbard. His entire body trembled with fury, his vision narrowing to focus solely on this insolent monk who dared to question his honor. At that precise moment, as the blade caught the afternoon light, Hakuin spoke with sudden clarity. "Here open the gates of hell." The words pierced through Nugi's rage like an arrow finding its target. In that instant, he saw himself clearly, consumed by anger, ready to keel over wounded pride, his mind clouded by fury. He understood that hell was not some distant realm, but the very state he inhabited in that moment. The samurai's hand froze on his sword as recognition dawned across his features. Slowly, with great reverence, Nugi sheathed his sword and bowed deeply before the master. His anger transformed into profound gratitude. "Here open the gates of paradise." His voice now filled with compassion. Buddha's wisdom reminds us, hatred does not cease by hatred, but only by love. This is the eternal rule. What emerges from this story is a startling revelation about the geography of our inner world. Heaven and hell are not distant destinations, but present moment experiences we create through the quality of our consciousness. Why do we so easily find ourselves at the gates of hell? Zen Buddhism points to the three poisons that cloud our minds: greed, hatred, and delusion. When Nugi's pride was wounded, hatred arose instantly, transforming a peaceful afternoon into a realm of suffering. His entire reality shifted from curiosity about the afterlife to murderous rage in mere moments. The deeper teaching here shows us that we carry within ourselves the capacity for both states. Paradise and hell are not places we go to after death. They are experiences we inhabit while living. Each moment offers us the choice between the hell of reactivity and the paradise of awareness. Consider how often throughout your day similar transformations occur. A critical email arrives, and suddenly your peaceful morning becomes a realm of anxiety and resentment. Someone cuts you off in traffic, and the spaciousness of your drive contracts into a tight knot of irritation. A thoughtless comment from a colleague, and your contentment dissolves into hurt feelings and defensive thoughts. In Zen practice, we cultivate the capacity to recognize these moments of transition. Like Nugi drawing his sword, we learn to catch ourselves at the very moment we're about to enter hell through our reactions. This recognition itself becomes the key that opens the gates of paradise. Zen master Huangbo taught, "The foolish rejects what they see, not what they think. The wise reject what they think, not what they see." When we're caught in reactivity, we're rejecting the present moment, the master's teaching, the opportunity for awakening in favor of our thoughts about how things should be. The Buddha said, "Better than 1,000 hollow words is one word that brings peace." Hakuin's apparent insults were not cruelty, but compassion in disguise. By provoking Nugi's anger so skillfully, he showed the warrior exactly what he needed to see: that hell is a state of mind we enter through our own choices. This teaching invites us to examine our own triggers. What words or situations instantly transport us to hell? Perhaps it's feeling unappreciated at work, being misunderstood by family, or facing unexpected challenges. Each of these experiences offers the same choice Nugi faced. Will we draw our sword or recognize the teaching? Tonight, as you notice irritation arising in response to some frustration, can you remember Hakuin's lesson? Can you recognize the moment when you're about to enter hell through your reactions, and instead choose the paradise of awareness? As the Buddha taught, what we think, we become. In each moment, we are either opening the gates of hell through unconscious reactivity or opening the gates of paradise through mindful presence. In a remote mountain region where execution grounds served as sobering reminders of mortality, Zen Master Banki sought to test the depth of his spiritual realization. For several nights, he sat in meditation beneath a wooden crucifix, using the proximity of death to penetrate more deeply into the nature of existence. After completing this intense retreat, Banki made his way to a nearby area where he could rest. He found a peaceful spot on an embankment surrounding a horse corral, where he lay down to continue his contemplation under the open sky. As he rested there, absorbed in profound silence, a harsh sound shattered his peace. From within the corral came the violent sounds of a warrior brutally beating his horse. The animal's cries mixed with the sharp crack of a whip and the angry shouts of a man losing control. Master Banki observed this scene with growing concern. The warrior was clearly frustrated, taking out his inner turmoil on the innocent animal. Each blow seemed to make the horse more agitated rather than more compliant, creating a vicious cycle of violence and resistance. Unable to remain silent, Banki called out from his position, "Hey, what do you think you are doing?" The warrior, absorbed in rage, ignored the interruption and continued his harsh treatment. The beating intensified, and so did Banki's concern for both the animal and the man degrading himself through such cruelty. "Hey," Banki called out again, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had spent years cultivating inner peace. "What do you think you are doing?" Still, the warrior continued, lost in frustration and anger. The horse became increasingly panicked, which only seemed to fuel the man's determination to force compliance through violence. A third time, Banki's voice rang out, "Hey, what do you think you are doing?" This time, something in the master's tone penetrated the warrior's rage. The man stopped his beating, climbed down from his horse, and approached the embankment. As he drew closer, his expression changed. There was something about this stranger that commanded respecter quality of presence that spoke of deep inner development. "You were yelling at me," the warrior said, his voice still carrying traces of anger, but now mixed with curiosity. "Do you have something to tell me?" Banki looked at the man with compassion, seeing not an enemy but someone caught in the same cycles of frustration that trap us all. His response was simple yet profound. "Rather than beat your horse for being unruly, why not chastise yourself and train your own mind instead?" The words hung in the air between them, like a bridge connecting to very different approaches to dealing with difficulty. The warrior had been trying to solve his problem through external force and control. Banki was pointing to an entirely different possibility. As the Buddha observed, conquer anger with non-anger, conquer badness with goodness, conquer meanness with generosity, conquer dishonesty with truth. This teaching captures the essence of what Banki offered the frustrated warrior, the recognition that our external struggles mirror our internal state. What emerges from this story is the profound insight that we cannot successfully force the world to conform to our expectations through aggression or control. The warrior's approach, beating the horse into submission, represents how we often try to manage difficult circumstances in our own lives. We become frustrated with external conditions and respond with force, criticism, or manipulation, never recognizing that the real work lies within. Why do we instinctively blame external circumstances for our frustration? Buddhist psychology explains that the untrained mind seeks to maintain its comfort by controlling its environment, rather than developing the flexibility to respond skillfully to whatever arises. This creates what Zen calls pushing the river, exhausting ourselves by trying to force reality to match our preferences. Consider how this pattern manifests in daily life. The computer that crashes during an important project becomes the target of our anger, when the real issue is our attachment to having technology work perfectly. The traffic jam that makes us late triggers road rage, when the actual problem is our expectation that travel should always be smooth. The family member who doesn't respond to our advice becomes the focus of our frustration, when the deeper issue is our need to control others' choices. In each case, we are like the warrior beating the horse, applying force to external circumstances while ignoring the internal conditions that create our suffering. The horse represents the uncontrollable aspects of life, other people's behavior, natural events, technological failures, and the inherent unpredictability of existence. Zen teacher Pema Chödrön writes, "You are the sky, everything else is just the weather." This points to the same truth Bankei offered the warrior. Instead of trying to control the weather of external circumstances, we can develop the spacious awareness that remains calm regardless of conditions. The real training involves learning to work with our own minds rather than trying to force compliance from the world around us. This doesn't mean becoming passive or accepting harmful situations, but rather approaching challenges from a place of inner stability rather than reactive frustration. Buddhist practice offers specific techniques for this internal training. Mindfulness meditation teaches us to observe our reactive patterns without being swept away by them. Loving kindness practice develops compassion for ourselves and others when things don't go as planned. Contemplation of impermanence helps us accept the changeable nature of all conditions. Tonight, as you encounter the inevitable frustrations of daily life, can you remember Bankei's teaching? When you find yourself wanting to beat the horse of difficult circumstances, can you pause and ask, what would it mean to train my own mind instead? Buddha's wisdom teaches us, hatred is never appeased by hatred in this world. By non-hatred alone is hatred appeased. This is a law eternal. The path to peace lies not in conquering external conditions, but in cultivating the inner qualities that remain stable regardless of what the world presents. Master Hakuin lived in a small village where he was deeply respected for his wisdom, compassion, and exemplary character. For decades, he had maintained a reputation as a pure and enlightened teacher, someone who had transcended ordinary human weaknesses and embodied the highest spiritual ideals. Villagers often brought their problems to him, seeking guidance and inspiration from his teachings and his impeccable way of life. In this same village lived a beautiful young woman whose family was well known and respected. When she became pregnant outside of marriage, her condition caused a scandal that rippled through the tight-knit community. Her parents were furious and demanded to know who was responsible for bringing such shame upon their family. At first, the young woman refused to reveal the father's identity. She was protecting someone she loved, someone whose reputation and future would be destroyed if the truth came out. But as her parents' anger intensified and the pressure became unbearable, she made a desperate decision. In a moment of panic and confusion, she pointed to the one person she thought could weather this storm better than her actual lover, the respected Master Hakuin. When her outraged parents confronted the Zen master with their daughter's accusation, they expected protests of innocence, explanations, or at least some expression of shock at being falsely accused. Instead, Hakuin listened calmly to their angry words and simply replied, "Is that so?" His response only seemed to confirm their worst suspicions. Surely, an innocent man would defend himself more vigorously. The scandal exploded throughout the village. People who had revered Hakuin as a saint now whispered that he was a hypocrite who had been living a lie. His reputation was destroyed overnight, and former students abandoned him in disgust and disappointment. When the child was born, the parents brought the baby directly to Hakuin. "This is your responsibility now," they declared bitterly. "Since you are the father, you must take care of this child." They thrust the infant into his arms and walked away, leaving him to face the consequences of a crime he had never committed. Again, Hakuin simply said, "Is that so?" and accepted the baby without protest or explanation. For many months, the former master cared for the child with tender attention. He fed the infant, changed diapers, walked the floors during sleepless nights, and provided all the love and care that any devoted parent would give. Neighbors who had once brought him offerings of food and respect now ignored him or spoke of him with contempt. He had lost his position, his reputation, and his livelihood, but he continued to care for the child with peaceful dedication. Meanwhile, the young woman struggled with the weight of her lie, watching the revered teacher suffer for her deception while caring lovingly for a child that wasn't his became unbearable. The guilt consumed her until she could no longer live with what she had done. Finally, she confessed the truth to her parents. The real father was a young man in the village, whom she had been trying to protect. Her parents were horrified to learn what they had done to an innocent man. They rushed to Hakuin's simple dwelling with profuse apologies. "Master, we have wronged you terribly," they said, bowing deeply. "Our daughter has confessed that you are not the father. We know now that you have suffered unjustly for our mistake. Please forgive us and allow us to take the child back to its real family." Hakuin listened to their apologies with the same equanimity he had shown to their accusations. As he gently placed the baby in their arms, he offered the same response he had given throughout the entire ordeal. "Is that so?" As Buddha's wisdom reminds us, hatred does not cease by hatred, but only by love. This is the eternal rule. What emerges from this story is the profound power of maintaining inner equilibrium regardless of how others perceive us or what circumstances life presents. Why do we allow external events and other people's